The arena of Zaltor was the pride of the alien capital. Its high walls were made of black stone that shimmered under the twin suns. Inside, the stands stretched higher than mountains, filled with thousands of voices from hundreds of different species. The galaxy's greatest fighters had shed blood here, and the arena floor was stained with the memories of victories and defeats. It was not just a place of sport. It was a stage for pride. Entire races placed their honor on the fighters they sent into the pit. Victories earned respect. Defeats carried shame. To stand in the arena was to stand before the galaxy itself. On this day, the air was alive with noise. The crowd cheered and shouted in countless languages, the sound rolling like thunder. Merchants waved glowing banners. Children of strange shapes and colors jumped in their seats. Some species released clouds of bright smoke in celebration, while others roared so loud the ground shook. The reason was simple. The champion Ralgor was set to fight. Ralgor was a beast of muscle and scale. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his reptilian body was armored with thick plates, and his claws could slice through steel. He had fought for 10 years in the arena and had never been defeated. His name was carved into the stone pillars as a living legend. To see him fight was to see destruction made flesh. The announcer, a six-eyed alien with a voice like a horn, shouted to the crowd, "Behold, the might of Ralgor, 10 years unbeaten, the terror of the pit. Who dares stand against him today?" The crowd roared. Everyone waited for the next challenger to appear from the gate. Many expected another champion from the warrior species of the stars, perhaps a hulking insectoid fighter or a beast bred only for war. Instead, when the gate opened, the figure that stepped forward made the arena laugh. It was a human. He was tall compared to his own kind, but beside Ralgor he looked small. He had no scales, no claws, no horns. Only plain skin covered his body. His clothing was simple, a gray combat suit that hugged his frame. His hands were bare, and in them he carried no weapon. The announcer paused, stunned for a moment, then laughed so hard his 6 eyes watered. His voice echoed across the arena. "A human? Who sent this creature to fight? Do they wish to feed Ralgor a toy?" The crowd exploded with laughter. Some aliens slapped their knees. Others jeered and shouted insults. From the stands, traders placed bets on how long the human would last before being broken in half. The highest guess was 1 minute. The human did not flinch. His name was Mark. His face was calm as he stepped onto the sand, the roar of the crowd crashing over him like a storm. He looked up at the alien faces that sneered and mocked, but he did not answer them. His eyes only moved to Ralgor, who stood waiting with a cruel grin. Ralgor stomped his heavy foot, shaking the ground. He raised one clawed hand toward the crowd, drinking in their cheers. Then his eyes focused on the human, his grin showing rows of sharp teeth. "You are smaller than my meal," he growled in his deep voice. "I will enjoy breaking you." Mark said nothing. He simply adjusted his stance. His feet pressed firmly into the sand, his shoulders loose but steady. His breathing was slow, controlled, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. From the stands, an old alien historian leaned forward. His long fingers tapped against his notes. He had studied the species of the galaxy for centuries, and he knew of humans only by rumor. They were said to be fragile, short-lived, and easily injured. But there were also whispers that in war, they were unpredictable. He narrowed his eyes as he watched Mark's movements. There was something different here. The horn sounded. The fight was about to begin. The crowd stood in a wave, eager to see blood spill. Flags waved, drinks spilled, and voices thundered across the walls. In the center of it all, Ralgor crouched low, ready to strike like a predator. His muscles rippled as he prepared to rush forward. Mark did not move. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The dust on the ground swirled around their feet. The suns burned above, casting long shadows across the arena. Two figures faced each other. One a towering monster of reputation, the other a lone human, mocked as weak. Silence, brief but sharp, cut through the noise. Then the horn sounded again, long and deep. The match had begun. The horn still echoed across the high walls of the arena when Ralgor moved. His body shot forward like a living avalanche, heavy feet pounding the sand. Each step shook the ground, and dust rose into the air. His wide jaws opened in a roar that rattled the stone pillars. The crowd screamed in delight. They had seen this charge many times before. Most opponents never survived it. Ralgor's size and speed made him unstoppable. He was like a storm crashing down, and no one could resist his first strike. But Mark did not run. He stood still, his eyes locked on the charging monster. His hands hung loose by his sides. His body looked calm, almost too calm. To the crowd, it seemed like fear had frozen him. They laughed louder, shouting that the fight would be over in seconds. As Ralgor closed the distance, Mark finally moved. He shifted his foot slightly, lowering his center of gravity. His eyes studied every detail of the rushing beast, the rhythm of his steps, the swing of his arms, the angle of his claws. To the human, it was not chaos. It was a pattern. The massive reptile lunged, claws raised to tear his opponent apart. But as the claws came down, Mark stepped aside with the smallest of movements. The claws tore into the sand, missing their mark. In that same breath, Mark's fist snapped forward, striking Ralgor's arm at the joint where the scales were thinner. The sound was sharp, a crack like stone struck by steel. Ralgor stumbled, his charge broken. He roared in pain and surprise, pulling his arm back. For the first time in the arena's long history, the crowd went quiet. A human had survived Ralgor's opening strike and had hurt him. Mark stepped back, his stance still steady. His breathing was calm, controlled. His eyes never left Ralgor, the Sei. Silence did not last long. Anger burst from the stands, mixed with confusion. Many shouted that it was luck. Others denied what they had seen. The announcer's 6 eyes blinked rapidly as his booming voice tried to keep control of the moment. First blood to the human. Ralgor's body trembled with rage. His claws dug into the sand, leaving long scars. His tail whipped back and forth, stirring the air. "You will regret that," he growled, his deep voice filled with fury. He rushed again. This time not with a straight charge, but with wide, sweeping strikes. His claws cut through the air, each swing powerful enough to split stone. He attacked high, low, left, right, never stopping, trying to overwhelm the smaller fighter with sheer force. Mark moved like water. He slipped between the strikes, each motion precise and efficient. His steps were small, conserving energy. His body bent and twisted at the right angle to avoid the claws. Every time Ralgor thought he had cornered him, the human was gone, sliding out of reach. The crowd watched in disbelief. This was not how the fight was supposed to go. Humans were fragile, easy prey, yet here was one dancing between the claws of a champion. Some began to whisper, their voices carrying unease. Mark's eyes stayed sharp. He saw the rhythm of the monster's attacks, the way the claws always came in pairs, the slight pause before the tail whipped around. He waited, patient, as a hunter. Then, when Ralgor's chest opened during a wide swing, Mark struck again. His fist slammed into the reptile's ribs. The blow was small compared to the size of the beast, but it was placed with perfect accuracy. Ralgor gasped, his body shuddering from the pain. His movement slowed for a brief instant. The crowd gasped. The announcer's voice broke with disbelief. A second strike. The human has landed a second strike. On the high balcony, the alien historian leaned forward, his old eyes glowing with excitement. "Yes," he whispered to himself. "I see it now. Precision, not strength. Control, Not rage. This is the human's way. His hands scribbled notes furiously, recording history as it unfolded. Ralgor staggered back, clutching his side. His pride burned hotter than his pain. His yellow eyes blazed with hatred as he stared at the human. "You think you are clever," he hissed. "You are nothing! I will tear you apart piece by piece." Mark did not answer. He only adjusted his stance again, calm as stone. The crowd no longer laughed. Many sat frozen, their eyes locked on the arena floor. Some shouted for Ralgor to crush the human quickly, while others whispered questions they never thought they would ask. Could a human truly win? Ralgor's tail lashed the ground, throwing sand into the air. He bent low, preparing for another charge. This time he was not reckless. His attacks slowed, his eyes sharper. He had underestimated the human once, and it had cost him. Now he would fight with the caution of a predator who knows its prey can bite back. The two fighters circled each other in the dust. The suns beat down, their heat shimmering across the arena. Sweat rolled down Mark's face, but his breathing remained steady. He knew his enemy was stronger, heavier, and built for war. But he also knew that strength without focus was nothing. The arena had fallen into a strange silence. The endless roar of the crowd had quieted into tense murmurs. Every eye followed the two figures as they moved. The air itself felt heavy, waiting for the next strike. Mark's mind was clear. Every sound, every motion around him faded. Only Ralgor existed in his focus. He watched the way the reptile's weight shifted, the way his claws flexed before an attack. He knew the third exchange would decide everything. Ralgor's chest rose as he drew in a deep breath, then he lunged once more. His claws flashed in. The sunlight, his body twisting with deadly power. The ground shook with each step. The champion of the arena was ready to end it. The sand of the arena lifted into the air as Ralgor's charge thundered forward. His body twisted with power, claws flashing under the twin suns. Every step shook the ground, each roar bursting from his throat like fire. He was the terror of the arena, the undefeated champion. No one had ever withstood his full fury. The crowd cheered louder than ever, convinced this would be the end. The earlier strikes from the human were dismissed as luck, small tricks that could not last. Now Ralgor was serious. Now the beast would crush him. Mark stood still, his body calm and balanced. His eyes never left Ralgor. To others it seemed reckless, even foolish. But to Mark, it was the only way. Running would waste energy. Fear would cloud the mind. He had learned long ago that the key to survival was control, not panic. Ralgor's claws came down in a sweeping strike aimed at Mark's head. The force behind it was strong enough to split a boulder, but Mark had already seen it coming. His foot shifted half a step, his head dipped, and the claw missed by inches, tearing through the sand. The crowd gasped. The monster had missed again. Ralgor did not stop. His tail whipped around in the same motion, a heavy strike that could crush bones. Mark bent low, letting the tail sweep past just above his shoulders. The wind of the strike brushed his back, but it did not touch him. Every motion was precise. Every move wasted no energy. Mark was not faster than Ralgor, but he was sharper. He read the rhythm of each attack as if it were a dance. The reptile fought with rage, and rage always left openings. The moment came. Ralgor overextended, both arms stretched forward in a clawing motion. His chest opened for a single instant. A space unguarded. Mark's body reacted without hesitation. His fist shot forward, striking with all the weight of his legs and shoulders behind it. The blow landed squarely on the joint of Ralgor's shoulder, the place where even the thick scales were thin. The sound cracked across the arena like thunder. Ralgor roared, his body stumbling from the shock. Pain flared across his face, and his claws dug into the sand as he tried to regain his balance. The crowd froze. Thousands of voices cut off at once, leaving only the echo of the strike ringing in the air. The human had done it. He had landed the first true strike. Mark stepped back, his breathing steady, his eyes unshaken. He did not raise his hands in victory, nor did he shout. He simply watched his opponent, waiting for the next move. To him, the fight was not about pride, it was about survival and discipline. On the high balcony, the alien historian leaned so far forward he nearly toppled over. His notes trembled in his hands. "Incredible," he whispered. "Not strength, but precision. Not chaos, but focus. The human fights with calculation beyond anything I have seen." The announcer finally found his voice. It trembled with disbelief as it boomed across the arena. "First strike! The human has landed the first strike!" The words sent shockwaves through the stands. Some shouted in anger, refusing to believe their eyes. Others sat frozen, stunned into silence. A few whispered among themselves, the first seeds of doubt planted in their hearts. Ralgor's pride boiled hotter than his pain. He had never been struck like this in all his years. No opponent had dared and no opponent had succeeded. To be touched by a human, of all creatures, was an insult he could not endure. His eyes glowed with rage, his teeth bared in fury. "You will suffer," he growled, his voice echoing deep through the arena. His massive frame straightened, muscles rippling with tension, his claws curled, sharper than ever, and his tail lashed the ground, leaving long scars in the sand. But beneath his fury was a seed of fear. Ralgor was not foolish. He had felt the strike. He had seen the calm in the human's eyes. This was no lucky blow. The human was watching him, studying him, waiting for the smallest mistake. The two fighters circled each other now, slower, more cautious. The arena seemed to hold its breath. The roar of the crowd faded to a low murmur as everyone leaned forward, eyes locked on the scene below. Mark's mind was quiet. He could hear his heartbeat, steady and calm. He remembered his training, the endless hours spent, mastering his body and mind. He remembered every lesson drilled into him: patience, focus, precision. He let those lessons guide his hands, his feet, his breathing. Ralgor lunged again, this time with more control. His claws swept with measured force, his body balanced to recover quickly if he missed. He was learning, adapting. But Mark was ready. He shifted just enough to let the claws pass, never moving more than necessary. The crowd began to notice. The human was not simply surviving, he was shaping the fight. Every dodge, every step, every movement pulled Ralgor into his rhythm. The announcer's voice broke with tension. "Can this human truly stand against our champion? Or are we witnessing a moment of history?" Ralgor roared again, throwing his whole weight into a crushing downward strike. The sand exploded under the force of his claws. Dust filled the air, hiding the fighters from view. For a moment, no one could see what had happened. Then the dust cleared. Ralgor was on one knee, clutching his injured shoulder, and Mark stood before him, untouched, steady as a stone. The arena erupted in chaos. Some shouted that it was impossible. Others screamed in anger. Many simply sat in stunned silence. For the first time in living memory, the champion had been brought low. Mark's eyes did not leave Ralgor. He knew the fight was far from over. The first strike had been delivered, but the beast was not beaten yet, and the next moments would decide whether the human's courage would lead him to victory or to his end. Ralgor rose slowly from the sand. His chest heaved with heavy breaths, and his shoulder throbbed where the human's strike had landed. Pain was not something he knew well. In all his years of fighting, opponents had fallen before they could touch him. Now, for the first time, he felt weakness run through his body. The crowd stirred with unease. The mighty champion, the beast they had cheered for years, had been forced down to one knee. Some shouted for him to rise and crush the human. Others whispered in disbelief. The sound of thousands of voices blended into a storm of noise that filled the arena. Mark stood across the sand, calm as ever. His breathing was steady, his body relaxed. He made no move to press his advantage. He only watched, studying Ralgor with sharp eyes. He knew the reptile was still dangerous. A wounded beast was often more deadly than a healthy one. Ralgor's yellow eyes locked on the human, blazing with fury. His pride burned hotter than the suns above. "You will not shame me," he growled, his voice echoing through the arena. "I will break you, and I will erase the memory of your strike." With a roar, he charged again. His movements were slower, now less fluid, but still powerful. His claws cut wide arcs through the air. Each strike aimed to tear the human apart. The ground shook under his steps, sand flying with every heavy footfall. The crowd cheered louder, trying to push away their fear. They shouted Ralgor's name, urging him to end the fight and restore their faith in him. Mark's eyes narrowed. He moved with precision, his body slipping between the monster's sweeping claws. Each time Ralgor attacked, Mark shifted just enough to avoid the strike. His steps were small, his balance perfect. He wasted no energy. The reptile's attacks came in a storm, one after another, but Mark saw the rhythm. He had studied opponents like this before. Fury created patterns, and patterns could be broken. The moment came when Ralgor raised both arms for a double strike. His chest and ribs opened for a fraction of a second. Mark stepped inside the swing, his fist driving forward with perfect timing. The blow landed against Ralgor's ribs. The sound cracked like a whip, echoing across the arena. Ralgor gasped. His massive body froze for an instant, then staggered back. His breath came in sharp bursts, and pain spread through his chest. The crowd erupted in cries of shock, disbelief rolling through the stands like a wave. "The human strikes again," the announcer shouted, his voice trembling with excitement. "The second strike has landed." On the balcony, the old historian clutched his notes to his chest. His eyes shone with wonder. "Yes," he whispered, "this is no accident. The human fights with purpose, with patience. He sees the weakness where none else look. He is not prey. He is predator." Ralgor's pride crumbled under the weight of the moment. He had been touched twice, humiliated before the galaxy. His rage boiled over, his roar splitting the air. He swung wildly, his claws tearing into the sand, his tail smashing the ground. The arena shook under his fury, but rage made him blind. Mark stayed calm. He stepped back from the storm, his breathing even, his eyes sharp. He knew better than to meet strength with strength. He let Ralgor waste his power, swinging into nothing, burning his energy with each furious strike. The crowd had changed. No longer filled with laughter, no longer certain of the outcome. They now watched in silence. Thousands leaned forward, eyes wide, their voices caught in their throats. For the first time, they saw the possibility that their champion might lose. Mark's movements were smooth, his body flowing like water around the strikes. His focus was absolute. Every muscle was controlled, every step placed with care. His training had led him to this moment, and he would not falter. Ralgor stumbled, his chest heaving, his body slowing under the weight of his own fury. His scales dripped with sweat, his tail dragging in the sand. His eyes burned with hate, but his strikes had lost their sharpness. Mark stepped closer, his stance lowering, his fists ready. He saw the weakness now, the small cracks in the beast's armor. One more strike, placed with precision, would decide the fight, but he did not rush. He waited, calm and patient, watching as the giant gathered himself for one more desperate attack. Ralgor raised his claws, his voice shaking with rage. "You are nothing! I will crush you with my last breath!" He lunged, throwing all his strength into one final swing. The crowd screamed, the announcer shouted, and the ground shook as the mighty reptile gave everything he had. Mark moved. His body slid under the swing, his steps light and controlled. He twisted at the perfect angle, avoiding the claws by inches. And then his fist drove forward, striking the same rib he had hit before. The blow landed with precision, stronger than the last. The crack echoed across the arena, and Ralgor's body froze. His breath left him in a choking gasp. His knees buckled, and he crashed into the sand. Silence. The crowd, once deafening, now sat frozen in shock. The great champion lay on the ground, his chest heaving, his body weakened. And the human stood tall above him, calm and steady, untouched. The announcer's voice broke the silence. The second strike! The human has struck again, and the champion falls! On the balcony, the historian whispered to himself, his voice filled with awe. The galaxy will remember this day. The age of human weakness is over. Mark lowered, his hands, his eyes never leaving Ralgor. He did not cheer. He did not boast. He only breathed slowly, ready for what came next. He knew the fight was not finished, but the second strike had changed everything. The arena held its breath. The massive sand-strewn floor seemed to vibrate under Ralgor's heavy breathing. His chest heaved with pain, his scales glistening with sweat. Every step was a struggle, yet his yellow eyes blazed with unbroken rage. Even wounded, he was a predator, dangerous and relentless. Mark stood across from him, calm as ever. His gray combat suit was dusty from the fight, but his body remained steady, poised for action. His breathing was slow and measured, his mind focused on the rhythm of his opponent. Every movement of the giant reptile was predictable now, yet it still carried enough danger to kill a human if he misjudged even slightly. The crowd was silent. Even the children in the stands were glued to the floor of the arena, their eyes wide with disbelief. Thousands of alien species watched as a human stood unharmed before a being no one had ever defeated. Murmurs ran through the stands, whispers of doubt and amazement mixing together. Ralgor roared, the sound echoing off the stone walls. His voice carried both fury and desperation. I will not lose to you, human. You are a pest, a creature too small to matter. Mark did not flinch. He did not respond. He only shifted slightly, lowering his center of gravity. His eyes were locked on Ralgor, reading every twitch of muscle, every shift of weight. He knew that the final strike had to be perfect. Precision, not force, would win this fight. The giant beast lunged. His claws cut through the air, aimed at Mark's head, his tail swinging with deadly force. The ground shook under the weight of his attack. The human did not move back. Instead, he stepped lightly to the side, letting the claw pass by, barely missing him. The tail whipped past, throwing sand into the air, stinging his eyes, but he remained unbroken. Ralgor growled in frustration. His strikes became wilder, less controlled. Fury clouded his judgment, but strength was still in his favor. Mark could feel the danger in each movement. One mistake now would mean defeat. One wrong step could end the fight and his life. But Mark was ready. He watched Ralgor overextend, the pattern clear now. Every swing had an opening, a momentary weakness. The reptile's shoulder where the human had struck before had not healed. The scales were thick, but not invincible. One well-placed strike could bring the giant down for good. Mark moved closer, careful, light on his feet. He watched Ralgor raise both claws high, ready to crush him in one final blow. His mind was still, empty of fear, full only of focus. Ralgor lunged with everything he had left. His claws came down fast and deadly. Mark twisted his body just enough, letting the claws slice through the space where he had been only moments before. He slipped inside the swing, his hand coming up in a perfect arc. The strike landed on the base of Ralgor's skull, the joint where neck and shoulders met. It was a precise hit, small but powerful enough to disrupt the giant's balance. The reptile froze, his roar cut short. His massive body toppled forward, crashing into the sand. The arena fell completely silent. The air was thick with dust and tension. Thousands of alien eyes stared at the fallen champion. Ralgor, the undefeatable, lay on the ground, unconscious. The human had done the impossible in only 3 strikes. Mark stood tall, breathing slowly, muscles relaxed. He did not raise. His hands did not shout or celebrate. He simply watched, waiting for the giant to move. When it became clear that Ralgor would not rise, only then did Mark allow a small nod of relief to pass through his features. The crowd erupted, but not in the way anyone had expected. There was no immediate cheer. Instead, there was awe, disbelief, and a quiet respect that began to grow. Thousands of voices mixed in amazement. "The human won! The human! He has done it!" The announcer, stunned beyond words, raised his clawed hands, trying to bring control to the noise. "Impossible! Unbelievable! The human has won in 3 strikes!" His voice trembled as he repeated the words, unable to believe what he had just witnessed. From the balcony, the historian whispered to himself, tears forming in his eyes. "History. This is history. A human, a single human, has done what no one else could. The age of human weakness is over." Ralgor stirred slightly, his massive body twitching. Slowly, he blinked, the fire in his eyes replaced by confusion and realization. The giant warrior had never been bested so decisively. For the first time, he understood that strength alone was not enough to win. Precision, courage, and mind could overcome sheer power. Mark approached cautiously, careful not to strike again. He extended his hand toward the fallen champion. The gesture was simple, yet shocking. Ralgor looked at the human's hand, then at his face, and hesitated. Pride and rage warred inside him. Finally, with a deep breath, Ralgor accepted the gesture, allowing Mark to help him rise. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, but now it was different. There was admiration, not mockery. Aliens from every corner of the galaxy realized that humans were not weak. They were capable, disciplined, and dangerous in ways no one had expected. Mark helped Ralgor to his feet. The giant reptile towered above him, yet his posture had changed. Respect replaced fury in his eyes. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of the human's skill and courage. The arena, once filled with noise and mockery, now hummed with wonder. Traders, children, and veterans of the fights whispered to each other, repeating the words they could barely believe. "He did it. The human won. The human is strong." Mark stood alone in the center of the arena, calm and steady, while thousands of eyes stared at him in awe. He had done what no one thought possible. 3 strikes. 3 perfectly placed strikes, and the greatest champion of the galaxy had fallen. The suns above glimmered on the sand and on the human's face, highlighting determination, courage, and calm focus. This victory was not just for himself. It was a statement for all of humanity. That humans, once dismissed as weak, could stand against the strongest of the galaxy. The arena had never been so quiet. For a few moments, it was as if the twin suns themselves had stopped shining, holding their breath. Thousands of alien spectators stared at the center of the sand-strewn floor. The mighty Ralgor, undefeated, for 10 years, lay still on the ground, defeated in only 3 strikes, and the human, Mark, stood above him, calm, steady, and unharmed. No one moved. The crowd, which had roared and laughed just moments before, now sat in stunned silence. The sheer impossibility of what they had witnessed weighed heavily in the air. Many whispered to each other, unable to form the words for what they had just seen. How could a human do this? One voice asked. Another said, Impossible. It is impossible. Even the announcer, the six-eyed alien who had once shouted Ralgor's name with pride, could barely speak. His clawed hands shook as he raised them toward the crowd, trying to regain control of the moment. The human has defeated the champion, he stammered, his voice trembling with disbelief. The arena has never seen such a thing. Mark stood still, breathing slowly, his eyes scanning the arena. He was not proud or boastful. He had done what he had, trained for, what he had prepared for, but he understood the power of what had just occurred. This was not merely a personal victory, this was a demonstration to an entire galaxy. Humans, long underestimated and dismissed, could overcome strength through skill, focus, and courage. Ralgor stirred slightly, his eyes opened, wide and bright with confusion. The fire that had once burned in them, fueled by rage and pride, was now replaced by something new: recognition, respect. The reptilian champion realized that the human standing before him was no ordinary opponent. His strength, precision, and calm focus had been unmatched. Mark extended a hand toward the fallen giant. The gesture was simple, yet carried meaning beyond words. It was an offer of respect, not cruelty. Slowly, Ralgor took the human's hand, rising to his feet with Mark's help. The movement was careful and deliberate, each step a recognition of the human's skill. The crowd shifted. Their disbelief slowly turned into admiration. Murmurs of respect began to echo through the stands. He is worthy," one alien whispered. "This human, he is not like the others," said another. Children looked at Mark with wide eyes, imagining a future where humans were no longer considered weak. Mark released Ralgor's hand and took a step back. He did not celebrate. He did not shout. He only stood, steady and calm, letting the moment speak for itself. This silence, heavy and filled with awe, was more powerful than any cheer. The galaxy had seen a human rise above what everyone thought possible. High in the balcony, the historian scribbled notes furiously, his hands moving faster than he could think. "This is a turning point," he whispered. "A human has demonstrated what no one believed possible. The galaxy must remember this. The age of underestimating humanity is over." His voice shook slightly with excitement. Ralgor lowered his head slightly in acknowledgement. Pride still burned within him, but it was tempered now by respect. The beast had been challenged, defeated, and had survived the humbling experience. In that moment, he understood something fundamental. Power alone was not enough to dominate. Skill, strategy, and focus could overcome even the strongest warrior. The arena remained silent for several long moments, the kind of silence that feels heavier than thunder. Every alien present seemed to sense that something monumental had occurred. Mark's victory was more than a personal accomplishment. It was a statement to every species in the galaxy. Humans, once dismissed as weak and fragile, had proven they could not only survive against the strongest, but could win decisively. The silence was finally broken by a small cheer from one section of the stands. It was tentative at first, a single voice, but then others joined. The applause spread slowly, then quickly, until the entire arena was filled with a new kind of energy, respectful, awed, and full of admiration. The aliens no longer saw Mark as merely a human. They saw a warrior, disciplined, precise, and courageous. Mark lowered his eyes briefly, acknowledging the recognition, but he did not let it distract him. He knew the battle was over, yet the true work had just begun. This moment, this silence, was a lesson for the galaxy. The people here would remember it. They would tell others, and humans would no longer be underestimated. Ralgor straightened, towering over the human once again. His scales glistened with sweat, and his body ached from the blows, but his gaze was no longer filled with fury. Instead, it held understanding. "You are worthy," he said, his voice deep but calm. "You have earned your victory." Mark nodded. "I only fought with what I had," he replied simply. It was enough. The crowd began to cheer louder now, not with mockery or expectation, but with admiration. Thousands of voices rose, a chorus of amazement and respect. Aliens who had once bet against the human now shouted his name in celebration. Traders, warriors, and children all recognized the significance of the victory. Mark walked slowly across the arena, his movements controlled and deliberate. Every step left a mark in the sand, a symbol of the human spirit. The silence that had held the arena was replaced by awe-filled cheers, but Mark remained calm, letting the lesson of the fight speak louder than any words could. The suns above cast long shadows across the arena, highlighting the human standing tall, victorious, yet humble. Around him, aliens of every species witnessed a new truth. Humans were not weak. Humans were capable of focus, strategy, and strength beyond their size. They were warriors in their own right, deserving of respect and attention. The historian, still scribbling notes, leaned back in his seat. He looked out over the arena and whispered, "This day will be remembered for generations. A human has shown the galaxy what it means to be strong, not just in body, but in mind and courage. Nothing will ever be the same." And in that silence, now broken only by the sounds of awe and admiration, the arena understood the truth. Humans could fight. Humans could win. Humans were no longer to be underestimated. Mark stood alone in the center of the arena, breathing calmly, watching the crowd, and understanding the power of what he had done. The silence had ended, but its impact would last far longer than any cheer. The galaxy had witnessed history. The arena was quiet now, but the energy in the air had changed. It was no longer filled with mockery, laughter, or anticipation of blood. Instead, it was filled with awe, respect, and admiration. Every alien in the stands, from the smallest child to the oldest warrior, understood that they had witnessed something historic. Mark stood in the center of the arena. His gray combat suit was dusty, and small scratches marked his arms from the fight, but his posture was calm and steady. His eyes scanned the crowd, noting every expression, every whisper. He had done more than win a fight. He had changed the perception of an entire galaxy. Ralgor rose to his full height, towering above the human, yet his expression was no longer filled with anger. His body still ached, and his pride was bruised, but he carried himself with dignity. He stepped toward Mark, his claws folded, his tail dragging lightly across the sand. "You have proven yourself," Ralgor said, his deep voice steady and calm. "Not with brute strength alone, but with skill, patience, and courage. You are worthy of respect." Mark nodded, a small smile forming on his face. "I only fought as I knew how," he said. "Strength is not always about size. Sometimes it is about focus and control." The crowd murmured in agreement. Many had never seen a human before, and now they saw one capable of standing toe-to-toe with the greatest champion in the galaxy. Some aliens looked thoughtful, considering the humans they had dismissed. Others shouted Mark's name not in mockery, but in admiration. From the high balcony, the historian leaned forward, his old fingers gripping the edge of the rail. His voice was quiet, but filled with wonder. "This is a day that will be remembered, forever. A human has taught the galaxy a lesson in courage, skill, and honor." He scribbled notes quickly, knowing the significance of every moment. Ralgor extended a clawed hand toward Mark. The gesture was simple, but it carried great meaning. It was not a challenge. It was a sign of respect and acknowledgement. Mark took. The hand, their grip firm, a symbol of mutual understanding between two warriors from very different worlds. The crowd erupted into cheers once again, but this time it was different. It was not the roar of expectation or excitement for blood. It was the cheer of respect, of acknowledgement, of witnessing something extraordinary. Thousands of voices filled the arena, celebrating a human who had changed the course of history with courage and precision. Mark and Ralgor stepped back, letting the applause wash over them. They did not need to speak. The respect between them, the proof of skill and discipline, was clear. Even in victory, Mark remained humble, understanding the weight of what had occurred. Ralgor looked at the audience and raised his claws slightly. "Witness what has happened here today. Let it be a lesson to all. Strength is not only in the body. Wisdom, focus, and courage matter equally. Even the smallest among us can stand against the greatest if they have the will and skill." The crowd cheered again, now understanding the message. Many species began discussing what they had seen, sharing the story of the human who had bested Ralgor in 3 precise strikes. Traders whispered to travelers. Children recounted every moment to their friends, and warriors in the stands nodded in approval. Mark took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. He knew that this fight would not just be remembered as a victory. For him, personally, it would be remembered as a statement for all of humanity. Humans, long underestimated, were capable of courage, strategy, and strength that could rival any warrior in the galaxy. He looked at Ralgor one last time. The giant's eyes held respect, but also a hint of curiosity. "There is much I do not understand about humans," Ralgor said softly. "But today, I have learned that they are not to be dismissed. They are capable of great things." Mark nodded again. "And there is much humans can learn from others too," he replied. "Strength and wisdom exist in all forms, in all species. Today was about more than winning a fight. It was about understanding and respect." The historian in the balcony nodded, his voice barely audible over the cheering crowd. "Yes, respect," he whispered. "This is the true lesson of the arena. Humans have earned it, and the galaxy will remember it." Slowly, the audience began to rise, standing and applauding with renewed energy. The cheering was no longer just for the thrill of combat. It was for courage, skill, and the power of focus. Humans had shown that they could stand against the strongest. They had shown that the impossible was possible. Mark looked around at the crowd, noting the mix of species, shapes, and colors. Every eye was on him. Every voice carried admiration. The galaxy had witnessed a human change history. Ralgor stepped aside, giving Mark the center of the arena. "Today, a new era begins," Ralgor said. "Let all who doubt humans remember this moment. Let all who face them understand that they are not weak, that they are warriors capable of great things." Mark raised his hand slightly in acknowledgement to the crowd. The gesture was small, humble, yet powerful. It was a symbol of mutual respect, of honor earned, and of courage recognized. The cheering swelled, growing louder with every second. The twin suns cast long shadows across the sand. Mark's figure, tall and steady, stood illuminated by the light of a new understanding. Across the galaxy, this story would be told again and again. Humans had been underestimated for too long, and now their place as capable and respected warriors had been firmly established. The arena slowly emptied as the crowd dispersed, still talking about the human who had defeated the greatest champion in only 3 strikes. Traders packed up their stalls, children ran through the stands, and the warriors who had doubted humanity whispered stories of what they had seen. Mark stayed in the center for a moment longer, breathing in the silence that followed the storm of the fight. He felt a sense of calm and satisfaction. Not because he had won, but because he had shown that courage, focus, and skill could overcome even the greatest challenge. Ralgor approached one last time, bowing his massive head slightly. "You have earned the respect of the arena," he said, "and the respect of the galaxy. Remember this, human. Today is a lesson for all." Mark nodded respectfully. "I will," he said, "and I will continue to fight with honor, wherever it is needed." With that, he turned and walked toward the exit of the arena. The sand shifted under his feet, each step marking the path of a human who had changed history. The crowd continued to cheer, their voices echoing long after he had disappeared from view. The arena, once a place of blood and fear, had become a symbol of respect, courage, and honor. And the human who had won in 3 strikes would be remembered for generations to come. The suns dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light over the arena. Mark's shadow stretched long across the sand, a reminder that humans had earned their place among the greatest of the galaxy. History had been made, and respect had been won. The human had proven that strength was more than muscle, that courage could overcome fear, and that honor mattered more than pride. The galaxy would remember the day when Mark, the human, stood victorious, and the arena fell silent in awe and respect.